Hoover responds. This is the third part of our Great Depression series here, and I believe this one will be fairly short. So let's talk about how Hoover went about promoting recovery. So in an effort to promote economic recovery, Hoover held a series of conferences bringing together the heads of banks, railroads, big business, labor, and government. He received a pledge from industry to keep the factories open and to stop cutting wages. Of course, this pledge failed, and Hoover had to so he goes about increasing public works, which were government-financed projects. Hoover asked the nation's governors and mayors to increase their public works spending. And at the same time, however, Hoover still refused to increase government spending or taxes. He feared that deficit spending would actually delay an economic recovery. So, as a result of this, Americans end up blaming the Republican Party for the Great Depression. Okay. As a result, in the midterm congressional elections of 1930, the Republicans lost 49 seats in their majority in the House of Representatives. All right, so as with all things, they pumped money into the economy. Hoover tried to persuade the Federal Reserve Board to put more currency into circulation, but the Federal Reserve Board refused. Okay, so Hoover set up the National Credit Corporation, which is called the NCC, which created a pool of money to rescue banks, but it just was not enough to help the banks out. So by 1932, Hoover felt the government had to provide funding for borrowers. So he asked Congress to set up the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, which was called the RFC for short, to make loans to banks, to railroads, and agricultural institutions. The economy continued to decline, though, when the RFC was too cautious in its loan amounts. So they weren't just, they had the money, they just weren't giving out enough of it. All right, so Hoover opposed the federal government's participation in relief, money that went directly to very poor families. He didn't like that. He felt the relief was the responsibility of state and local governments. So there you have that federal and state issue there. So in July 1932, Congress passes the Emergency Relief and Construction Act to get money for public works and for loans to states for direct relief. So naturally, people were in an angry mood. So by 1931, discontent over the economy starts to lead to violence. You get looting, you have rallies, and you have hunger marches, which probably wasn't as far from the truth because a lot of people were going hungry at this time. During a hunger march at the nation's capital, police denied protesters food and water and medical treatment. Kind of ironic. Congress intervened, stressing the marchers' right to petition their government. Hey, Congress did something right for a change. That's amazing. Congress also permitted them to march on Capitol Hill. So between 1930 and 1934, creditors were foreclosing or taking possession of almost 1 million farms across the United States. Some farmers destroyed their crops, hoping that a reduction in supply would cause the prices to go up. Not a bad idea, but it probably didn't help them in the short term. One other thing that happened in 1924, Congress had enacted a $1,000 bonus be paid to veterans in 1945. And so in 1931, Congress introduced legislation that would authorize veterans to receive their bonuses early. So that's exciting for them because they need money, right? Well, in 1932, we have what's called the Bonus Army. They marched on Washington, D.C. to ask Congress to approve this legislation. Hoover refused to meet with the Bonus Army, and the Senate voted the new bonus bill down. Some of the marchers left. Some marchers stayed, moving into deserted buildings in Washington, D.C. And then Hoover, being a good American, ordered the buildings cleared, and disputes between the remaining people and the police and later the Army resulted in several deaths. Now remember, these are veterans who were marching on, who had largely served in World War I, who had fought for the country. So Hoover is evicting them, basically, and telling them that, no, you're not going to get your money. Good play, Hoover. All right, that concludes our talk of the beginning of the Great Depression. We'll talk more about the Great Depression with FDR and what he does with his New Deal politics in 1932. And you have an Edmodo quiz, so have fun. Thank you.